Hello and welcome to another Sprues and Brews video. Today we are looking at Arks of Omen Abaddon, the start of the next wave of narrative supplements for Warhammer 40,000. So first of all, I just want to say a massive thanks to Games Workshop for sending us a free early review copy to have a look at. I am really excited about this series of books. If you've seen some of the other videos that we've done on the site, Broken Realms was one of my favourite supplement series for Age of Sigmar, and let's face it, we're probably getting to the end of 9th edition 40k and 10th edition is on the horizon. And normally what happens is that we get a series of books, supplements, whatever you want to call them, developing the story and moving us on to the next kind of like phase of the game. Now with AOS and Broken Realms, they kind of went all out on the narrative on them. While there was gaming supplement in them, I think the real kind of focus of those books was the narrative. And this is something that we're getting from 40k with the Arcs of Omen series. So they mentioned on Warhammer Community that one of the things that people didn't like was lots of supplemental rules and lots of different books. So we've had narrative supplements in the past that have had extra content for armies, so different armies of renown, different rules in there, different stratagems. And I've said I had quite a lot of feedback saying that people didn't like that because it meant that the rules were all over the place. It was all a bit bitty. So this book doesn't contain any optional army rules anymore, which is great. Instead, fully half of the book is based on the narrative of what's happening in the universe at the moment, and then the other half of the book is a new game mode for boarding actions, which is really cool. So a lot of this narrative, as we'll go through, talks about kind of these space hawks that have been sent out across the galaxy by Abaddon and Vashtor the Archifane. And obviously other factions within the 40k universe are trying to stop them. So this game lets you play out battles on Space Hawks. Now obviously we've got the Kill Team Into the Dark kind of range and onwards, where we've got Kill Team battles set within Space Hawks. But this is rules for playing full kind of 40k games on Space Hawks, so that's really fun as well. Obviously a big bulk of this book is the narrative though. So a little warning here. There will be some spoilers ahead. I'm not going to go too much into kind of like the massive stuff, but I can't really talk about this book without talking about the spoilers. So if you do want to kind of experience this yourself, I'd bail out now. Spoilers though, it is really cool and yeah, develops the narrative in an interesting way. So yeah, should we crack this open and have a look at what's happening? So like I say, the best way to think about this book is similar to the Broken Realms series, even down to the kind of naming convention. So book 1's Abaddon, book 2 I believe is Angron, book 3 is Vashtor. We don't know who book 4 is apart from it being a Xenos character. Now obviously on the New Year kind of teasers that we got, there is an image that looks very much like Farsight. So it wouldn't surprise me if he is maybe the 4th kind of character in these. And again, the Broken Realms series was 4 books, so I don't know if this is 4 books too. We'll see as things develop. Also, at the time of filming this, I don't think there's any models coming out alongside this. We get the scenery set for the boarding actions, but we don't get the model for Vashtor in here, even though he does appear in the narrative and there are pictures of the model in the book. So hopefully he's not too far behind. But yeah, so this essentially takes us on from where we are at the minute in the kind of 40k universe. The Cicatrix Maledictum has split the galaxy in sunder, and there's a bit of an offensive going on from the forces of chaos. We've seen in some of the recent kind of narratives that there's been a big push, there's a big offensive going out kind of from the dark side of the galaxy through to the Imperium side, and it seems that maybe for once Abaddon seems to be winning perhaps. And in this book we learn that he has got a new ally in Vashtor the Archifane. So Vashtor is this interesting character. He wants to be a god. This is the guy here. He's essentially a demigod, the god of kind of like creation and machines and technology. He comes to Abaddon on board the Vengeful Spirit. Some cultists have done some kind of like ritual to kind of summon him in there, and yeah, he seeks out Abaddon and seems unusually cooperative for a demon. Abaddon absolutely does not trust him, but he seems more trusting than other demons that he's encountered in the past. And he's got a proposition for Abaddon. We don't learn the exact ins and outs of what's happening in this book. What we do learn, though, is that Abaddon has agreed to this. We know that there's something out there in the universe that will reveal something that will have repercussions for the Imperium. Whether it's going to be something that damages the Imperium or could be used as a weapon against the Imperium, we don't really know, and Vashtor and Abaddon kind of like skirt around this during the narrative. I suspect as we get through the books we'll start to find out what this is, whether it's a secret, whether it's a weapon, whether it's just knowledge that can be used against the Imperium. However, to access it, there's various keys that are used to kind of like get into this thing, whatever it is, but they're scattered across the galaxy. And one of the things that Abaddon is kind of lacking is just a brute sledgehammer to kind of get his way to these locations and get these various artifacts and relics and keys that he needs in order to unlock this mystery. So Vashtor proposes to Abaddon that they could create a fleet of weapons known as the Arcs of Omen, which is what this series is named after. And essentially these are space hulks that have been, if you don't know kind of 40k background, a space hulk is basically a graveyard of ships that's crashed together and then just drifts through the void. Vashtor wants to weaponize these by infusing them with demonic power, fitting weapons of his own devising to them. He's got basically kind of like warp generators within them that can be used to kind of return the ships back to their origin point after a mission, or use a teleportation device to pull the relics that he's looking for back to them. And Vashtor and his various forces, which I reckon that Vashtor might become kind of like the new incarnation of the Dark Mechanicum. It's like the concept of the Dark Mechanicum, but I guess with a new twist to them. In the same way that the Leagues of Votan are a new twist on the Squats, Vashtor and his followers, if we do get an army at some point, it wouldn't surprise me if this is the kind of like Dark Mechanicum force, but rather than it just being spiky Mechanicum, a bit more demonic and weird. This is the guy who kind of like creates the demon engines. He infuses demonic souls into mechanical constructs, and he does the same kind of thing with the Arcs of Omen. So he gets these ships, he infuses them with demonic power, and basically they assign chaos forces to each of these ships. Some of them just use as distractions, some of them on more important missions might have a more competent crew on them to try and get these important locations that he's trying to get to. Interestingly, all of the ships have got Alpha Legion agents on them. In case that things go awry, they can take control of the ship and pull it onto its true course. So there's all sorts of deception and stuff going on inside here. And essentially the pair of them, Vashtor and Abaddon, launch an offensive across the entirety of the galaxy. So these ships just drop out of the warp and start bombarding planets. Each ship's got like the equivalent firepower of an entire fleet. So the Imperium's taken unawares, and initially they just seem like random and chaotic assaults. I suspect as the kind of storyline goes on, the Imperium might start to catch up with what's actually happening, but from the onset it's just chaos, literally. Ships appearing in systems, bombarding planets, forces going down to the planets, fighting through to get random items and relics that seem completely irrelevant and meaningless, and then just disappearing back to the planet. Any important locations, Abaddon goes himself, and we see a couple in here where Abaddon and his kind of honour guard go to a planet to recover something. And I think one of them is just a chalice with trees inscribed on it, which is very weird, but Vashtor, says that they need all these various relics and items to get to wherever they're trying to get to. Now, obviously, there's a bit of a mystery if we don't know what they're trying to get to, but there's a few things we can infer from here. So, the chalice that Abaddon gets himself, it's carved with trees, and I believe that Caliban was a kind of forest planet. so it could refer to that. Back at the start of the book, we do see a bit of a prophecy, and there's things in there as well that perhaps maybe kind of lean towards this being something about the lion. It's not outright expressed in this book, but it wouldn't surprise me if this has all got something to do with the lion and maybe the fallen, and that's the weapon he wants to use, or maybe he thinks he can turn the lion to the forces of chaos. I suspect as the series goes on, we'll get more of the kind of puzzle pieces together, but there's quite a few things dropped here and there that maybe imply that it is regarding another Primarch or some secret. And yeah, so essentially these guys go across the galaxy trying to get all these parts, using these ships, the Arcs of Omen, to do that, fitted out by Vashtor with all sorts of cool kind of devices and stuff. So like I say, they've each got a personal warp portal that essentially is... Abaddon kind of sees the crew of these ships as expandable. The important thing is getting these relics. So if the Ark of Omen gets to the location, his forces manage to get this relic, he can get this securely sent back to the fleet, back to him and back to Vashtor, so together they can unlock this puzzle. And this is why we've got Alpha Legion operatives on the ships as well, just in case maybe, I don't know, a Chaos Renegade force who thinks, actually I've got this massive weapon of destruction now, I'm just going to turn against the War Master. They can intervene and make sure that things don't go too wrong. Abaddon isn't too concerned about, utter chaos and some of these things going off as just, random attacks across the galaxy, because he can use that to his advantage, because the Imperium is kind of caught unawares by this. They've been fighting at the front of the Cicatrix Maledictum, trying to hold back the tide. So when all these ships start appearing in real space and across the galaxy, they don't really know what to do. While this is happening as well, we learn that Angron has been sent to deal with an important relic on one of the planets, and there's quite a considerable Imperium force kind of waiting for him. So obviously we know that book 2 is going to be Angron. So the kind of story ends with Vashtor heading to that planet because he wants to see what's happening. So yeah, it's all very interesting. I really like things that develop the storyline, and I really like the kind of mystery behind what Vashtor and Abaddon are after. I kind of like that we don't know what the MacGuffin is straight off the bat as well. We're kind of in the dark, and I suspect as the series goes on we'll get drip fed a little bit more information about what's happening. Interestingly, you may have seen as I flipped through there as well, Dante is mentioned as well. So we know Azrael's getting a new model. Perhaps Dante will get a new model as part of this as well, and we'll see what's happening on the kind of far side of the galaxy while it's happening. But yeah, for kind of like story development, this is going to be one of the biggest things that's happened to 40k for a long time. So I'm interested to see how the rest of the story goes, and it's well worth reading if you're a fan of the 40k lore, because I think all this is going to set up what's happening in 10th edition and what's happening for the future of the game. So in the same way that Broken Realms kind of advanced the storyline, we definitely see the same here, which is super cool. We get a nice gallery section next, like we do in most books. There's a few little snippets of Vashtor kind of in the background of some of these images. I really hope the model drops soon and we get some rules for him, because he is such a cool character, and I just want to paint him up. I'm interested to see how he fits into the Force as well, because obviously at the minute we haven't got a Dark Mechanicum army, for want of a better word. But yeah, I suspect when he does drop, he'll probably be a character that can be taken in any Chaos army. Who knows, by the time this story arc ends, maybe he has become the Chaos God of technology, and that's quite exciting as well. And obviously that's got repercussions for the Mechanicum as well, and yeah, all sorts of stuff. And we know the Chaos Gods are quite jealous and at each other's throats, so another deity in the mix is going to mix things up as well. So yeah, the first half of the book is focused on lore. The second half of the book is on a brand new game type, boarding action. So this is really exciting. As mentioned in the intro, we've got a kill team to represent kind of small skirmishes on spacecraft. Boarding action missions are essentially full games of 40k. You've got a smaller force, and you've got kind of special detachment and certain units you can take, but it is still at its core a game of 40k, and that's really, really exciting. There's also a few things in here that might hint to some things that we see in the next edition of the game as well. A lot more interactiveness in the battle, so we'll go through this and have a look at what's happening. We are planning on getting our kind of boarding action scenery built up and painted, so we can do some battle reports of this as well. We're really into kind of small, kind of 1,000-point games of 40k and AOS, so small boarding action missions with elite crews fighting each other will be really, really fun. So the key thing is, a lot of this is based around the boarding action terrain. So if you've picked up the recent Kill Team sets, you'll already have this. They've got cool doors that open and close. They're all interchangeable, so you can do different layouts, and there's a nice board you can play on. So if you've got both of the current Kill Team sets, you've actually got a big enough battlefield and enough scenery to play through this. I believe today there's also a boarding action set which contains essentially that same number of terrain as well that you can use. So that again is pretty exciting. Now, in games of boarding action, both sides start with a single command point, and you can only use command points on boarding action stratagems from this book, so you can't use any from your codex. That's quite refreshing to me. I think we've got to the point of stratagem bloat, and stripping this down to some basic ones is quite exciting to me. I quite like that. We're fighting in close confines and stuff, so there's a few quirks to movement and engagement range and stuff. Engagement range is 2 inches, and obviously with all the walls and stuff, you've got to kind of get around things as well, so the rules spell out how the kind of walls interact. Anything that kind of can fire with that line of sight can't be used, because we've got to imagine on top of all these kind of walls and columns and stuff, there's there's another hull of the ship, so you can't fire over walls because there's nothing to fire over. Visibility when you're shooting something, say if there's it's quite a good example. Say if you've got a squad here and this guy's shooting at them and did 3 wounds, you could only remove 2 of them because you can't actually see the 3rd one. Horus Heresy is quite similar in the way wounds get allocated. Similarly, line of sight, if you cannot see the model because he's around a wall, you can't see him, you can't charge him, you can't see through any other models in order to shoot kind of units behind them as well, because again we've got to imagine that just above the heads of these models is kind of like the ceiling of the corridor. So that makes things quite tactical. There's different units you could take. So let's say Terminators, for example, are quite good for leading a boarding action, as you would imagine from Space Hulk and stuff, because they can take quite a lot of firepower, and then that leaves the kind of more lightly armoured troops safe behind them to start advancing up. So that's quite fun. Objectives in this game, you control them if you're within an inch of them. So quite short kind of radius compared to normal 40k games. You've really got to kind of like get on those objectives. But we'll see in a little bit, you don't necessarily have to sit on them for the whole battle. You can interact with doors. There's quite a lot more interactiveness in this game mode. And we see that really with the actions. So there's a load of new actions that you get in boarding actions. The key one for objectives is the secure sight action. So essentially you can do this action, so while you're standing next to an objective, you've got it. If you do the secure sight objective, you've got control of that even if you move away from it. So that's really, really good, and it gives you a reason for doing those actions as well. And it also means that units that can do actions and shoot are very good as well. So the idea is that maybe you'll get a unit in, secure it, and then have a supporting unit going up, but then your original unit that secured that objective can then move off it and start advancing further into the ship. So that's really, really fun. We've also got an interesting one of set Overwatch. So Overwatch is an action that you can do in this game mode, where it's very similar to the Overwatch from 2nd edition 40k. So basically, if you set a unit to Overwatch, maybe they're in a corridor, there's a door at the end of it, enemy comes and opens that door, because your unit can now see a unit, they can shoot. And what you can do is have multiple units set to Overwatch to kind of like react when people pop up. Really, really cool. So not kind of on the charge like it is in the current game, basically if a unit kind of moves through their line of sight, they can just shoot. And like I say, players of 2nd edition 40k will recognise that, and I really hope this becomes a thing in the new edition of the game. One of the things that frustrates me in 40k at the minute is very much it's both sides deploy behind cover, and then kind of like you're jumping between cover, but there's not an opportunity for the other side to kind of snipe people as they're going past. The Overwatch rule in here allows exactly that. You could have somebody in a really good kind of like vantage point, so they're set up to shoot units that move past. And then because once you've made that Overwatch action, you remove the token, that then opens up the possibility of having units that will run across to draw that fire before your more important units move into position. So there's loads of tactics and stuff you can do with that. It's really, really fun. There's also a set to defend action as well. So while set to defend was, you know, on a charge, you could choose to do it. It's now an action that you can do. So it means that when you do fight, you get +1 to hit, which is really cool. And again, the fact that it's tied to an action makes those units that are very good at performing actions quite useful to have. Obviously you can open doors and interact with them, but what's really cool is that if you've got, say you're trying to open a door and there's an enemy unit on the other side of the door, you do like an opposed strength test to kind of represent the struggle over this door. So they're trying to hold it shut, you're trying to pull it open. Again, it makes it feel more interactive and exciting rather than just being able to open the door with no penalty to it. So I find that really, really fun. It is an action to open it, but if you do manage to wrestle the door open and there's someone on the other side, you can then fight them as well. So really, really fun. Really like that, and I hope we see kind of more stuff like that within 10th edition. Mentioned earlier that there's limited stratagems in games of boarding action, and yeah, it's stripped back down to the bare minimum. We've got command reroll, we've got counter-offensive, and we've got insane bravery, with command reroll being in 1 CP and counter-offensive insane bravery being 2. It gets rid of all the bloat, you can't use your normal army ones. Yeah, really, really like that. I kind of hope we see the back of stratagems. I've got a feeling we probably won't, but at least a reducement in the number of stratagems that we get just to make things a bit more manageable, and this might be a point towards that. And in boarding actions you get some special like command traits, so they're called enhancements in this one, which again, in AOS we see the terminology of enhancements. This might be something that we see similar maybe in the new edition of the game. But basically your warlord can choose to take one of these enhancements. So you've got superior boarding tactics, where you start with 2 additional command points. Close quarters killer, where every time they make a melee attack you can reroll the wound roll. Defensive linchpin, while a friendly unit is within 6 inches of the bearer, each time a modelling unit fires Overwatch, a unit can hold steady. So the hold steady rule basically gives you better Overwatch, so rather than hitting on a 6, you hit on a 5+, so that's really cool. Expert breacher, the bearer can start to perform the operate hatchway action when they're selected to make a normal move. If they do so, that action is completed immediately and they cannot perform that action again this turn. Now, if there's any enemy units within an inch, the enemy can still attempt to prevent the action happening. So basically, they don't have to do the roll to try and open the door, it just happens straight away. Personal teleporter, when the bearer arrives from strategic reserves, you can set it up either wholly within one of your entry zones or anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from any model. So entry zones are similar to, I guess, deployment zones in a normal game, and they represent the points where you're coming onto the ship. And then trademark weapon, when you select this enhancement, select one weapon that the bearer is equipped with, and make a note in your army roster, increase the strength and damage by 1. And it's considered to be a relic for all rules purposes. So again, a more kind of focused list of upgrades for your characters, again all based around boarding actions. So the armies themselves in games of boarding patrol are very different to a normal 40k army. While it runs on the main 40k rules, the construction is going to be a little bit different, because you're not going to be able to get tanks and aircraft and stuff into a spaceship. It's going to be a more kind of like tightly focused, knife to the throat kind of force that's kind of going on this assault. So you can take 1 HQ, 0 to 3 troops and 0 to 3 elites. Now, Warhammer Community put up some army lists for boarding action. They're free to download on Warhammer Community, and they've got some more restrictions and rules in there, so do make sure you check them out. But essentially you're looking at kind of small elite forces of 500 points, They're going to be really nice. I kind of hope that they do some boxes around various boarding parties. You know, I can see, I don't know, Space Marine Terminator Captain and a load of Terminators has been a really cool thematic one. Equally, you could have something really cool with, I don't know, Gene Stealers and Lictors led by a Hive Tyrant or something. That'd be pretty fun. So there are some rules on how you build it. So select your faction as normal. You set your sub-faction rules as normal, but again, there might be some restrictions within the army list over on Warhammer Community. You can't take any models that have the monster, vehicle, jump pack, cavalry, biker, or fly rules, and you can only have one character model. If a unit's maximum size is less than 5, you can only include that unit in a boarding patrol if it's a minimum size unit. If its maximum size is 5, you can include that unit as a minimum size unit. Or if it can include additional models, you can do so as long as the starting strength of that is 10. And you cannot include any units with the starting strength of more than 10. So basically that means that the maximum unit size within the game is 10. So you can't take like 20 unit blobs of Necron Warriors, for example, because again, they're probably a bit big to be getting around a spaceship. It's more kind of tightly knit forces. Now we'll see later on that units that are 10 models or more split down into 5 unit squads as well, similar to the what are they called, combat teams, combat squads on Space Marines. So your 10 squad of Necron Warriors would be deployed as 2 5-man groups, and again that kind of fits with the, I guess, the theme of the game of these. If you think like Alien or something, as they're moving through the ship, they're in small parties, it's not a big troop of people wandering together. So again, that kind of fits the thematics of wandering around a spaceship. So yeah, really, really cool. 500 point games, limited units you can take, but they're really, really cool. And then we get the full kind of mission pack as well. You muster your army, you determine your mission. There's 9 missions within the pack as well, which is really cool. You set up the terrain and your kind of entry hatches and stuff. You form your boarding squads. This is where your squads with 10 models get split into 5-man squads. You roll off for the attacker or defender. You both get a command point, and then you start setting up near your entry zones. So this is essentially kind of the boarding points on the ship. And then you can keep people back as reserves who can then come on through entry zones as well. So yeah, it's very different because you've got small squads that are moving around together, but it gives a more claustrophobic and exciting game of 40k, and really looking forward to playing through a little campaign of these. Now, if you have picked up the scenery separate to Kill Team, you might not know that they're all kind of like, each piece in Kill Team and in boarding action is kind of labelled with different indicators to make map building easier. So if you've already labelled all these for your Kill Team game, you're in luck because all the maps use the same labelling mechanic, I suppose. What you can do is just get a Sharpie or something, write these numbers on the bottom of the pieces, and then when you're putting together the maps, you'll see that they've got kind of like the names and numbers of the pieces on there to make it easy to construct it. So if you played any board games, for example, with lots of tiles, it's a similar kind of concept. They're all numbered up so you can create these quite quickly. And yeah, we get 9 missions in here. So what we're going to do on the channel is play through some of these. I think we can have a bit of a campaign. Hopefully over the course of the Arcs of Omen kind of like storyline, we want to play through kind of as much of this stuff as we can, because it's going to be you know, quite a bit of fun, isn't it, going through it all. So yeah, that is a look at Arcs of Omen Abaddon. Interesting book. It's I'd like to say it's focused more on people who enjoy the narrative, but the whole new game mode in there I think will appeal to a lot of people. So it's quite some time since we've had a new game mode for 40k, and you know, it's interesting to kind of mix things up. One of the big kind of pros of it is that boarding action games will fit on a, you know, a dining room table, which is great. A good option for like gamers night as well, if maybe you play a quick game of boarding actions after your full 40k game. I can see a lot of people kind of focus on these and make new armies, because you've only got a 500 point force that's only limited kind of like troops choices. It's probably quite cheap to put together a force as well compared to a full army. So if you're maybe craving trying out a different force. Like, I don't know, maybe if we're going to do a Drakari army but couldn't quite commit to a 40,000 point force, these are only 500 point forces, you might need a couple of boxes to do it. So really, really good option. The story is really, really good, and I'm interested to see how it progresses. Obviously there's a few little spoilers in there, but definitely read it yourself because there's lots of cool stuff going on. I'd love to know your theories onto what the prophecy is about, what the keys unlock that Abaddon and Vashtor are trying to get, and yeah, what your thoughts are on the progression of the story. Do you like seeing the kind of storyline advancing like this? So like I say, we are planning on doing some boarding action missions on the website as well, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, until next time, have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.